It's my shit right here. Say what, that's my shit right here. Mm. Welcome back to another episode of Road to William. Not me, not put my hat on today. Welcome back to another episode of Road to William. We play before. You know, I just want to point out for myself because I'm holding myself accountable. So this is really to myself. I've been trying to push this, daily video, daily, and I miss some days video wise. Shorts, I'm always gonna post, but video wise, I was slacking, so I have to. I'm back up on my guard, on my game, video after video, shooting these buckets, shooting these buckets. We just shooting these buckets. So we in the gym today. So today's video. Today I watched it fresh out the jump. They like, bro, what? I've seen this movie 100 times, probably more than that, but I wanted to refresh my memory and see what was anything else I could dive into really. If you, I know a lot of people have seen this, but so it will be spoilers. So I don't really tell the full movie, but I do have some points I want to point out. And first off, it was made by the Hughes brothers, 90s film. I asked y'all in the post on YouTube, I said, guess, what movie we're gonna do. And I gave y'all a hint. I was like in the 90s. I didn't even check to see if people said anything, but let's see. Hold on. Let's live check this real quick. Let's live check it just for a sec. I'll be on YouTube. YouTube got its own video, but shout out to Ashley. I'll be balling basketball. I'm not gonna say don't tell me that. Oh my god. Okay, so today's video is on Menace to Society. And after rewatching this, there are some things that I was like, certain things are interesting. I forgot I made a point. Well, yeah, kinda. So start with Kane's character. This is a good way to start. Picture right here because this was still kind of in the beginning of the film. I find it funny that this photo is like a sight from the future, how it's gonna return back to them off what they did in this scene. There was a part, and I'll try and find the part where I'm talking about, but this scene, it's them three in the car, it's Kane, it's O Dog, it's Amax, it's bro, I just had O Dog, right? It's Kane, O Dog, Lorenz Tate, and you got Amax driving in the front seat. Um, at the end of the movie, it's this same scene, but it's like flipped. It's a day and night kind of thing. And so this scene, they're kind of like Kane's telling them, we got to get back at what they did to him and his cousin and retaliation. And they robbed him. They passed on his cousin. So they like, we got to retaliate. That's O Dog, and O Dog is like the youngest of them all. Talking about some, yeah, we got to retaliate. And he kind of like making fun of Kane because he's like, don't get too sensitive on who's going to be out there because Kane's whole thing is like, we got to make sure it's no kids or no old people sitting outside because I don't want to hurt nobody like that. Like, I just want to get the people that did it. And O Dog's kind of like, forget all that, like, blah, blah, blah. Because he's like already mad at something bigger than what this is. This is just an annoyance that he's like, no, we have to take care of this because we're already getting fucked over by society. And so I think O Dog's character kind of represented what a lot of new generation, I think he represents every new generation because every new generation always sees a problem of what's happening in their new society, in their new world. And they're gonna look at it different. They're gonna, you see the same cycle. And I want to tie that into Kane's grandfather and Sharif. Kane's grandfather and Sharif were similar characters in terms of history, and also Amac's character who's sitting driving in the front seat. Three of those three represent history, like we can say Black history, but they represent this part of history that, and it's focused on Black people, get tired of hearing sometimes. We know it's important to say, we know it's important to know these things, but it's like, how do we tie that into right now? How is that history going to help us eat today? How is that history going to help me, push, push forward the next day mentally, physically? How's that going to make me money? A lot of people say. And so I put them three together because the grandfather is upholding this history of religion. Like you saw in the picture in the house, they had a picture of the Last Supper, and it was the white Jesus. And a lot of Black households had that. Not mine. I didn't have that. But I'm saying that it's kind of it reminded you of that scene from Good Times, where they had a white Jesus on their wall. That old depiction of, okay, this religion is another way of saying we know this, but like, why is it important? And they passed him on too. So what are we even doing? So he's trying to uphold this history and pass it down because that's what's helped him through. And I think they overlooked him because they didn't like what he was saying. They was talking straight out of the Bible, the white man, it's all this. Like, what does this have to do with us? But he still was living to tell the stories of how he made it through. So even though it wasn't their way of what they fully understood, they could have just looked, instead of saying, oh, he an old man, they could have been like, oh, he's still around. No, he doesn't have the biggest, no, he doesn't have a house. He was in the projects with them. Backyard was gangbangers, people fighting, all sorts of shit going on in their backyard. But in their home, they had peace. And even though it was outdated to the new gen, it was something that you can still kind of look at like, okay, yeah, you can pick apart religion and look at the pros and cons of everything, especially that. But if you had to pick a pro over a con, I would say that he was, the grandpa and the grandmother were pillars, um, in a test, to show that if you follow something, if you believe in something through these hard times, you still will be okay. Because the grandmother still was happy, but she was also sad. But she was at peace. And so they were a good representation of just kind of like, I think they were overlooked because people look at them outdated, but I think they're not trying to live for that part. They're trying to live for the now. How do I get through right now? It was a rush. And so like Sharif kind of represented, I say, like the Black history of it, like the modern, how you see it now, right? Like if trying to uphold history and looking at the leaders and how they made it through. But his character also showed kind of like leaders die too. You could be the most civil, righteous, what have you. You could walk that line and struggle and still crack a smile, but you can go out just as easy as your man's who's in the streets. And I think Sharif kind of, his character showed like, hear that saying like, wrong place, wrong time. I think it was just, how do you submerge yourself? Kind of like Jesus. Everybody brings this up when they're talking about certain people. Jesus was around people you probably would look up and down on, pass on, and you would probably question why would he be there. And I think Sharif showed that kind of side of the Black Jesus side of okay, if they're okay, let's put Black Jesus up there, right? Because old dog, he didn't see like he couldn't get that outdated version of Jesus, but he had Jesus walking with him through it all. I think Sharif was their Jesus in a sense because he was trying to teach them the right way. He kept putting in their ear like, "Hey, like maybe you shouldn't do." He was like their angel on their shoulder. But everybody, they don't want to hear that. He's at the parties with the chick, they all vibing. They don't want to hear that either. But then what else are we talking about? Because then, but he showed like a something that people overlook too. Like he could be your peer, and you'll overlook him because he's preaching something that you. The thing is, they weren't being in front of them made sense to why they should follow those reasons. Black Jesus, white Jesus, why should we follow them? We all fucked up here. We're all still scrambling for scraps. O Dog's character didn't really hear it or listen until that gun was in front of him, not in a negative way, but his peer talking about, highlighting something in his face. He needed something like in his face for him to like really understand what was going on. He would get arrested, he'd get out. He'd get shot at, he'll shoot back. But when they pointed something in his face, it made him stand up at attention. And throughout the movie, I realized it's like it kept showing me like it doesn't matter sometimes of it was kind of like coming of age story, but it didn't really matter how well your home was. I think it always goes back to the environment as well. Okay, if the home is good, then the environment has to match too. Because if Kane's grandparents were in everyone's household, the environment might be different. Can't say it is, can't say that. Maybe if you had more of the grandparents in O Dog's house, maybe, but because he didn't live there, there was no consistency of hearing that good. Stopping by every once in a while, that didn't really do anything. But that's why I want to go to Ronnie, played by Jada Pinkett Smith. Her character, I believe, showed Kane more like stability. She showed him because I compared Ronnie and Eileen like side to side. Eileen was someone people kind of they overlooked her too. They overlook you, they don't respect you. They didn't respect the old. They didn't respect somebody trying to learn. They didn't if it didn't uh, directly hit them, they didn't really care about it. That's kind of like in your face, like, yeah, people die every day, people this and that every day, but until it's part of you, you might look at it a lot different. You're going to handle it different. But Eileen showed freedom for Kane, like that. You single, you vibing, and then you got to be careful in those moments because not just the pregnancy part, but the emotion because even though for him it was a hit quick, for her, she probably thought it was someone she could vibe with and grow with in a sense. She's about more like family. Like for her, when she found out she was scared, but maybe she was like, oh, maybe talking with him, we can work something out. But he met her with the opposite response, like, nah, I want nothing to do with that piece. And that comes into play with her cousin, and this is going to tie back to this photo, but Eilena's cousin, and it ties at the end too, but he's overlooked. He's so overlooked, he ain't even got a name on here. I looked for it on IMDb, it said Eilena's cousin. I said, damn. But Eilena showed Kane responsibility. Like when it's in your face, this movie was like all about what are you gonna do when you're approached in these situations? It's not about sitting here talking about, yeah, If I won the lottery, I would go back and just buy up the neighborhood. Like, no, you first. You don't want to know. It was food first. I'll go somewhere with food first. But so for that example, didn't have a kid before meeting Eilena. It was just Ronnie and her son Anthony. And so for him, that was like kind of a quick stop, picking up. They ain't nothing serious. He drop by, he kick it, and we'll get to him and his relationship with the son, but with her son, but that was a stop and go. It wasn't in his face as much as Eilena was showing him, like, okay, you can play, but then this is the reality of it. Um, Ronnie showed more structure, and if Kane was going to be in their lives, he was going to have to be a father, not just a father figure. So stepping up even higher than what he looked at Purnell to be, he had to go above that. Like, no, you can't show him the way that he showed you because look where he is now. When it was in his face, it was different. Like the detective was like um, in his face. Like, yeah, the cops on the street might do some bullshit, right? But then it's like the detective was like, no, I'm gonna sit down and we're gonna have a one-on-one conversation. And that's what I'm talking about throughout this whole movie was a theme of like one-on-one of you versus you. And like, yeah, with the detective, he was tampering with his freedom. It was another thing he was tampering with. He was tampering with these females. They said, don't say females, don't do that, don't be that nigga, please. Those women, they like, bro, you're crazy. But for real, like, he was tampering with a lot of things. Even when his grandfather asked him, Kane, do you care whether you live or die? This motherfucker say, I don't know. Like, bro, what the hell? And then when you realize things, it's too late. That's with anything. Anything on this list, with love, with friendship, with your future, with your freedom. I noticed that, from the beginning to the end, it really was not just the coming of age of Kane, but also Anthony, because he's watching, he's like the next Kane in a sense, but we're overlooking him too because he's just a kid. All the people they just sunning and it was literally sunning them because, and if you don't know what sunning them is, I don't know how you made it to this channel, but he was getting sunned right along with the religion, the old people, the Malcolm X's. They didn't pay attention because even at the end, tying back to Eilena. Eilena was looking like more, she wanted a family. Her cousin, they must come from this like loving like family in a sense, sort of, to that he ready to ride out just for his cousin because he approached Kane off the respect first, like, bro, I don't like maybe they could have talked it out way better than that, but it was already hostile. Maybe if O Dog wasn't there, I think it would have been different. Like Sharif was their angel who was around, but I think O Dog was that devil on the other end. The evil, the good versus evil on your shoulders, who's around you is what the outcome could be. If you're around someone rowdy, rah, rah, it might replica and you gonna hit back with the wave. Because I feel like if O Dog wasn't there, maybe if he sat on the porch with him, maybe his nosy grandpa would have heard and he would have intervened. Maybe invite him into the house. If he was invited to the house instead of O Dog, I think he would have still been alive because that's the one who ended him. But also, he had to understand what family was. He kept running away from it because his parents um, was no longer there. So it was kind of like, well, what the fuck? Why should I listen to anyone if my parents aren't here, including the father figure, Purnell? Yes, these are my grandparents, and he felt like he had to be old because they knew him, but it was that history that you were disconnecting from. Leaving home, she represented the that dream. Sometimes people go after, right? She didn't go to LA where like because they were already in LA. So it's like, well, you ever see those movies like going to LA, going to New York? It's like we're going to Atlanta. And I think that was a good segue to kind of show what Atlanta was becoming, and what Atlanta represented, black first, black women, one, right? Black women trying to better themselves, their family, trying. And so a lot of them were leaving. A lot of, like, Sharif was leaving. They were all going to Kansas. I thought that was funny, the Kansas part. Not in Kansas City anymore, and I kind of want to explore that. You know what I mean? Let me know in the comments how you feel about it. What is Kansas like? If you're from Kansas, what up, Kansas? What are y'all doing? Are you part of the red state? I don't know. Okay. Probably. The send off, I call it, because what happens when the environment no longer serves the people? And what do you want people to just, that's what O-Dog didn't want. Like, as negative as he took it, you kind of understood that he didn't want to end up in that same environment. But he never left the environment. He didn't want to leave. He judged others for leaving because how dare you leave the home? You're just like everyone else that's been in his life. Leave. Everybody leaves. Now his best friend is leaving. And I think he didn't like that because he had to grow. You're either gonna, in those moments, he was faced straight on. You're gonna wait around because you've done so much stuff. People are just, you just walk out. You know what I mean? So he should have been in those rooms with them. But it's like, oh, well, he'll sit there, but he'll go one and out the other. So in those moments, I think it's a good question to ask. Y'all can say in the comments, but in those situations, how do you help someone like O-Dog? He understands the religion, the history, understands the good and the bad, but chooses the hardest way because it's the easiest and fastest outcome. How do you convince someone like the new gen, the up and coming generation, not to give up in that way? That's a good question that they could spark up. They could definitely, I don't know how it's like now, but if they could do another film like this, even if it's not like a part two, make some more films like this. More films about decision making, about what are you going to do in this particular situation. And that to not, I think stability with O-Dog would have kept, because he kept being around the stuff he wanted to be around, which was the gun, which created a lot of negativity. It was broad daylight. They had the lights off, watching the same film. And O-Dog's friend, I forgot his name. He didn't really have too many lines, but his part was very important because he represented something like not just history, but he represented the stability in O-Dog's life. Like, he didn't have parents. We don't even know where his parents is. His friends represented the stability he had at the crib, which was negativity. It was dark. They kept they didn't even have the TV on. They had a regular TV and a mini TV on top of that. The big TV was off. The mini TV, because it's like they didn't want to look at the bigger picture. It was more like they saw that one little thing and focused in on it. And that's what like a lot of their lives was like. Like a lot of this stuff, the fights and the BS they were in could have been avoided. Like that little, like that's little compared to the rest of your life. And they felt like every situation was the rest of their life, but it wasn't. But no one was there to turn on the other TV. You're watching something, someone hurt someone over and over again. You're gonna be trained to do that. It was oh, I'm not going. That's That's all I wanted to dive into today, though. I'm gonna be dropping this tonight, so if you're watching this tonight, let me say tonight. Look at that, tonight. Yeah, but I'm about to do another video um review. Just keep doing these because I like doing them. I like looking at different films. I like old films, new films. Recommend a film for me. But the next one about to be a little bit more funny because although I do love doing these, it do take a toll. So I'm about to go out and zen outside, take a brizzy break. Um, Make sure y'all drinking out water. Oh, I got some more movie reviews coming up, so be on the lookout for that. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe.